Every scholar, every reformer, every builder of the Islamic civilization, they all had one thing in common: a mind that could see what others couldn't. Not because they were special, superhuman, whatever, it was because of the foundation, the source they were using for that geniusness. Al-Imām al-Shāfiʿī rahimahullah, he says, أصحاب العربية جن الإنس يبصرون ما لا يبصر غيرهم. رواه ابن أبي حاتم في آدب الشافعي ومناقبه الصفحة 112. Imam al-Shāfiʿī, he said that the people of Arabic, the people that take Arabic seriously and they see the importance of it, they are like jinn amongst humans. They perceive what others do not. They see, understand what others do not. The author further explained that يعني أنهم غواصون في المعاني يستخرجون من الدليل ما لا يبصر غيرهم ذلك الاستنباط. He says that they are like, they dive into the meanings just like nobody else does. And they are able to remove and extract from that meanings that others can't. Now, this statement of an Imam al-Shāfiʿī is so deep, is so profound, because if you look back in history, from the time of the Salaf and up until recent times, our Ummah's legacy has been shaped by those that were at the forefront. As-Sābiqūn al-Awwalūn, the first Muslims that came. Those that were considered extraordinary because they possessed something that distinguished them from others, which allowed them to accomplish great feats and great victories. But if you look closely, after the tawfiq of Allah, there was one common underlying commonality in between all of these great men. And today, inshallah, we will explore examples that bring to life this same statement of Imam al-Shāfiʿī, how mastering the Arabic language unlocks wisdom, and how that wisdom awakens and gives you hidden abilities without you even knowing that you was capable of. Now you see, when Imam al-Shāfiʿī said that people who know the Arabic language are like jinn, he didn't mean theory. It was a description of men, literal men like Umar ibn al-Khaṭṭāb radiallahu anhu, for example. So let's take a closer look at Umar ibn al-Khaṭṭāb. Umar wasn't just a warrior, a statesman. He was a mujtahid, a jurist with deep understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. It was actually reported by Imam Ahmad والترمذي والحاكم من طريق مشرح ابن هعان عن عقبة ابن عامر رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول لو كان بعد نبي لكان عمر ابن الخطاب. That if there was a prophet after me, it would have been Umar ibn al-Khaṭṭāb. Now you might ask why. That's a big statement. And the reason was because of how sharp his insight was and how brave he was, because of how naturally he understood the revelation, not needing much explanations. So for example, in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, in his reign when he was ruling in between year 632 and year 634, Umar was the one that reasoned the compilation of the Quran after the battle of Yamama. He saw that there was a lot of huffaz, a lot of people who memorized the Quran who died, and he made his ijtihad meaning compiled based on all his knowledge and reason. He came to the realization that compiling the Quran was something crucial to do at that moment. So obviously the value and worth in this ummah of Umar ibn Khattab, don't even have to mention. During his reign in 634, 644, Islam expanded to Persia, to Egypt, Jerusalem, and beyond. This level of political mastery didn't come from charisma alone. It came from clarity of thought and precision in the Arabic language. As we said earlier, he was from those who didn't need much explanation after the revelation was descended. And you can see many hadith, you will see وَقَالُوا. And what does that mean, Ya Rasulullah? A lot of the Sahaba, they needed further explanation, even though they were Arab. But Umar ibn Khattab, he was from those who understood straight away the meanings of the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ because of his understanding of the Arabic language. He had as well a rare gift, which was detecting lies, hypocrisy, and contradiction in someone's speech. Now, Ibn al-Qayyim, in his book Al-Firasa, he mentions that وكان عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه من أعظم الناس فراسة وكان يفرق بين الصادق والكاذب بنظرته وكلامه. Amongst the most insightful people, Umar ibn Khattab, he could distinguish between the truthful and the liar by their appearance and their speech. And scholars attributed all of these qualities of Umar ibn Khattab to his mastery of the Arabic language. Not just grammar, but the emotional resonance that the Arabic language has with al-Islam, i.e. the texts of the Quran and the Sunnah. And scholars of al-Islam, they take all of these qualities of Umar ibn Khattab, his leadership, his ijtihad, his foresight, his psychological sharpness, back to one particular thing. Umar ibn Khattab, he's known for having said, تَعَلَّمُوا الْعَرَبِيَّةَ فَإِنَّهَا مِن دِينِكُمْ. Learn Arabic, for it is part of your religion. Now imagine if today, let's take the terms and terminology of nowadays. If Umar ibn Khattab was the president of a country, of the country you live in, and he says, learn the Arabic language because it's part of your deen, how much would that have as an effect in you? And if there was a whole political campaign around it, it would hit more, right? So take that same hit and put yourself in that situation and take this qawl of Umar ibn Khattab where he says, تَعَلَّمُوا الْعَرَبِيَّةَ فَإِنَّهَا مِن دِينِكُمْ. Learn the Arabic language because indeed the Arabic language is part of your deen. So when Imām al-Shāfiʿī, rahimahullah, he said that Arabic gives people a perception like jinn, Umar radiallahu anhu was living proof. Now if you want to see what happens when legacy meets with the language, take as an example Umar ibn al-ʿAzīz rahimahullah. He ruled from 717 to 720. And yet scholars say his rule was like a second khilafah of the Rashidun. That's how clean, principled, and transformative his whole leadership was. But where did that kind of mastery came from? It came from someone who, like Umar ibn Khattab before him, was not only grounded in religious knowledge, but also deeply trained in the Arabic language. A mastery that granted him that profound insight and that sharp discernment of what's happening in the world, in the knowledge of al-waqi', of the reality. Now, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz wasn't appointed because he was from Banu Umayyah or because of his lineage. He was appointed because he was an extremely knowledgeable man. Before he even ruled, he sat with scholars of Medina. It's been recorded that he used to sit in halaqat of Sa'id ibn Musayyab, who is from Kibar al-Tabi'in, known as Sayyid al-Tabi'in, the leader of the Tabi'in, those who saw the companions but didn't see the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, before assuming his role as a Khalifa, he learned from such caliber of scholars. So during his Khilafah, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he abolished unjust taxes. He returned land to people who had been taken their land from. He wrote letters to governors correcting injustice. And those letters were so eloquent, so moving, that they have been preserved until this day to study them. He didn't rule with the sword or force. He ruled with the Arabic language, the law. He reformed the Islamic empire using ink, not blood. And that ability to articulate justice with clarity and reform wisdom came from his mastery of the Arabic language and deep understanding of the deen. Also, one of his most lasting contributions, he was first to issue formal order for the systematic collection of hadith. So just like Umar ibn Khattab, he had the reasoning and ijtihad and opinion based on research and based on his knowledge that compiling the Quran after all the death of those Huffaz was what made sense. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, he had similar to that opinion but with the hadith. Once he started seeing that the Arabic language was getting weak because of the expansion of al-Islam in different countries, but yet the importance of the hadith being preserved so the Muslims are able to learn their religion. It's not all leaders that have this level of intent and level of love to preserve the religion of al-Islam. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he wrote to Abu Bakr ibn Hazm. He says, وَكَتَبَ عُمَر ibn Abdul Aziz إلى أبي بكر ابن حزم انظر ما كان من حديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فاكتبه فإني خفت دروس العلم وذهاب العلماء. He wrote to him, he said, look for whatever exists and that's not written down from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and write it down because I fear the fading of knowledge and loss of the scholars. That's the level of importance these governors in those times gave to the Quran and the Sunnah and the knowledge of Islam. Just think about it, the hadith collections that we benefit from today, Bukhari, Muslim, and beyond, were made possible by a man who understood the weight of words, the power of preservation, the urgency of expression of well expression in the Arabic language. That understanding came through knowing the Arabic language and knowing how beautiful it feels when you can be eloquent in the Arabic language. So what allowed Umar ibn Abdul Aziz to do more in 20 years than what most do in 20? It wasn't his piety, it wasn't his political savvy, it was his intellectual precision, his ability to connect revelation to reality, to extract meaning, to communicate clearly, and to reform a civilization justly. And again, it all goes back to the same source Imām al-Shāfiʿī spoke about, the companions, Ashab al-Arabiyyah, the people of the language. Those who learn the language are like jinn. They see what others don't. And Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was one of them. Now let's speak about another important historical figure, Ibn Khaldūn. Ibn Khaldūn is the pure representation of what happens when Arabic meets analytical brilliance. Because for him, the Arabic language served not just as a communication tool, but as a way of analyzing the fall and rise of civilizations. You see, Ibn Khaldūn, he was born in Tunis, in Tunisia, in 1332. And he was a scholar that wasn't just a historian, and he wasn't just known as a judge or regular teacher, regular scholar. No, he became what many consider to be the father of sociology, historiography, economics as well. All of these different fields that centuries after the West conceptualized as actual fields. And he was the man that wrote works around these types of fields. And all of this from his mastery and from his own mind. Yes, it came from a man deeply rooted in the Arabic language. And even if he wasn't born in the Arabic Peninsula, he became good at the Arabic language. Because Tunis is not considered the Arabic Peninsula. And still, he was from the prominent scholars in the Arabic language. And all of this was before he even wrote al-Muqaddimah, which is one of his famous work. So just like the scholars before him, he understood that the key to understanding the Ummah and being able to help the Ummah is understanding them. It was through the Arabic language, through its structure, its depth, and its traits that develop in you once you know it. So Ibn Khaldūn's Muqaddimah, his known, renowned book, it wasn't just a historical text as many know it, but it was an intellectual revolution because it analyzes Asbab al-Umran wa Suquti, the rise and fall of civilization, which is a genius knowledge to have. And the way how he uncovered those patterns is through his sharp use of language and rigorous reasoning. So his ability to distinguish between sound reports and fabricated ones, as in a hadith, it was all made possible because of his strength and depth in knowledge in the Arabic language. And that's how he became better at Islamic sciences. Because without the Arabic language, you cannot go too in depth in Islamic sciences. And that's how in his Muqaddimah he said that اللغة مفتاح العلم ومن فقه اللغة تمكن من العلم وتفاوت في الإدراك. That language is the key of knowledge. Whoever masters the language will be empowered in knowledge and will excel in understanding. So he understood that the more refined one's relationship to Arabic, the more precise their understanding of reality is. You know what's amazing about all of this, that the Western scholars today still study al-Muqaddimah as a political science, anthropology, economics, and historiography source of knowledge. Like for example, Arnold Toynbee, the famous British historian, he said a philosophy of history which is undoubtedly the greatest work of its kind that has ever yet been created by any mind in any time or place. But you see, this Western scholar Toynbee, like many others, was unaware of the full source of this greatness. Ibn Khaldūn was a product of the Islamic tradition, shaped by Arabic and inspired by revelation. He served as a qadi, a chief judge, which requires knowledge of fiqh, a diplomat and a teacher as well he was. And he was entrusted by major political missions across North Africa, Andalusia at that time, and even Egypt because of his ability to speak truth with clarity, eloquence and wisdom. So like Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he didn't rule with the sword. He reformed with the pen, advised through language, and uncovered truth through critical thought. And all of that stemmed from his mastery of the Arabic language, not merely as a language, but as a lens through which he understood reality, society, and in human behavior. And obviously, as a result, the Ummah of al-Islam. So you see here, what set Ibn Khaldūn apart was not just his education, it was his ability to connect principles from the Quran and Sunnah to the rise and fall of empires. Use language to analyze the psychology of power, then extracts truth hidden behind the surface of events happening in civilizations, and then based on that, realize if the empire will last or he will not last. And this is knowledge that to civilizations and in countries and armies, it can be a threat because you understand more than the average person. So you could technically strategize to import things into a civilization in order for it to develop a particular something, a particular pattern that therefore causes the empire to fall. So this is how sharp of a mind Ibn Khaldūn was. So when Imam al-Shāfiʿī said, the people of Arabic, they are like jinn, they see what others don't. Ibn Khaldūn, he was definitely one of them. Just like Umar ibn al-Khaṭṭāb, just like Umar ibn al-ʿAzīz, and many more. You see, the point here is that Arabic isn't just a language. It's a lens that rewires your brain to access divine knowledge, lead with clarity, and break free from intellectual dependency. Because without it, you're pretty much locked up. You are locked up based on somebody else's knowledge. You need somebody to understand things. So as you can see, all the mujaddidun, all the revivalists, all the visionaries in Islamic history, they were strong in the Arabic language. It was a necessity. So just like coders see systems behind any software architecture, the Arabic language will allow you to see structure behind meanings, the hidden logic, the deep connections, the system beneath the actual UI and surface. So the point is that the deeper you go into the Arabic language, the more it builds your wisdom, your genius mind. The farther away you are, all the way until not knowing it, the closer you get to the opposite of geniusness. So if you're somebody that aspires, especially a man, you aspire to be something bigger than what you are, then learn Arabic is the first step. We are talking about getting access to the depth of revelation, Quran, Sunnah, access to the minds of the greatest scholars of the Ummah and the words they have produced, access to a way of seeing the world and yourself even through a different lens. Arabic isn't just about grammar and charts and vocabulary drills, and it's about intellectual leadership. It sharpens your spiritual perception and it breaks you free from being dependent on translations, summaries, and second-hand understandings. Because without Arabic, you're always leaning on somebody else's lens. You are reading subtitles of your own legacy, basically. It's the difference between watching history unfold and you actually shaping it. So you see Umar ibn al-Khaṭṭāb, Umar ibn al-ʿAzīz, Ibn Khaldūn, they were not merely just figures. They were visionary minds who saw beyond their present and laid foundations and set them so the generations to come of Muslims, we can take them as an example. These stories are not just for us to look at them. You need to extract them, read them, and start taking action on them. And now is your turn, my beloved brother, my beloved sister, not just to follow their footsteps, but to think as they thought. Let's be visionaries of our own reigns, at least, to see what they saw and to carry the weight of the ummah and the courage. Because the depth of your impact will always be limited by the depth of your understanding. And the depth of your understanding begins with the Arabic language. Because the Arabic language will allow you to connect with the Quran. And the Quran is the only thing that will allow you to transform into your next version. And fair enough, you might not want to be the next governor of this Muslim country, but your children, your family is your empire. And the effect that you have on them will be limited by your understanding. And as we said, your understanding begins with the Arabic language. Assalamu alaikum.